The scent of my homemade apple pie filled the air, a warm, comforting aroma that had been a constant in this house for nearly 50 years. My hands, still nimble despite their age, had moved with a familiar rhythm, chopping the apples, mixing the sugar and cinnamon, weaving the lattice crust with the practiced ease of a lifetime. The pie was a special gesture for a special visit. My son, Michael, and his wife, Sarah, were coming over, and I had promised them a proper Sunday dinner. This was not a simple meal. It was an occasion, a ritual that had become more precious since my husband, George, had passed away 3 years ago. The house felt cavernous now, its silence occasionally broken by the gentle chime of the grandfather clock in the hall or the creak of an old floorboard. It was a silence filled with memories, both sweet and painful. Lately, Michael's visits had been less about sharing a meal and more about something else entirely. It started subtly, with a sigh here, a grimace there, followed by a hushed conversation with Sarah in the living room. It was an unspoken tension, a low hum of worry that had been growing for weeks. I had tried to ask, of course, "Is everything all right, dear?" I would say, my voice as gentle as I could make it. "You both seem so troubled." They would always brush it off with a forced smile. "Everything is fine, Mom. Just work stuff." But my heart knew better. A mother's intuition is not a passing fancy. It is a deep, knowing certainty woven into the very fabric of one's soul. I had seen that troubled look on Michael's face before, in his youth, and it was a look that spoke of trouble far deeper than any work stuff could explain. The doorbell chimed, and I felt a little flutter of excitement. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to open the door, my smile already in place. Michael stood there, his face pale and drawn, a sharp contrast to the bright, cheerful facade he was trying to maintain. Sarah was beside him, her expression a tight mask of anxiety. They came inside, and the usual pleasantries felt strained, like a fragile piece of glass about to shatter. I led them to the dining room, where the table was set with my best china, the set we used for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and the pie sat cooling on the counter, its golden crust a beacon of warmth. We sat down, and the small talk sputtered and died. Michael picked at his food, barely touching the roast beef I had meticulously prepared. Finally, he put his fork down with a clatter. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "Mom," he began, his voice thick with a mixture of shame and desperation. "We have to tell you something." Sarah took his hand, her knuckles white. "The bank, they are foreclosing on our house," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We are going to lose everything." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Their home, the one where my grandchildren had grown up, the place filled with so many memories of laughter and holidays, was gone. Panic welled up inside me, but a more powerful emotion quickly took its place, a fierce, maternal love that demanded I protect my child, no matter the cost. My son's face was a mixture of humiliation and despair, a look that tore at my heart. I knew in that moment what I had to do. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, considering the silent turmoil. I was not just a mother. I was a provider, a protector, a person who had always been the foundation for my family, ever since George passed away. It was my role to fix things, to make sure my family was safe. Over the years, I had watched as my son navigated the complexities of adult life, and I had always been there to help, whether it was advice on a new job or a small loan for an unexpected car repair. But this was different. This was everything. "How much do you need?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Michael's eyes widened. "Mom, you do not have to do that," he said, but I could see the flicker of hope in his eyes. "Do not be silly," I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. His skin was cold, his fingers trembling. "Tell me the number. You are my son. You are my family." He named a number that made my stomach clench. It was more than $250,000, the entire sum of my life savings, the money I had been meticulously saving for decades for my own retirement, for unexpected medical bills, for a rainy day. This was the money that was supposed to give me peace of mind for the rest of my life. It was a terrifying number, but the fear was nothing compared to the pain in Michael's eyes. It is what you would have inherited anyway, someday, I said, trying to make the sum seem less monumental, to alleviate his guilt. The phrase felt hollow even as I spoke it, a lie I told myself to make the sacrifice easier. But the truth was, this was not about inheritance. It was about saving my son and his family from a disaster that was poised to swallow them whole. The next few days were a blur of bank visits, wire transfers, and signing documents. Each signature was a physical weight, a final goodbye to the years of hard work, frugality, and planning that had gone into building that nest egg. The bank manager, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Peterson, looked at me with a concern that I tried to ignore. She asked if I was sure, if I had considered all the alternatives. I just smiled and nodded, saying that my family needed me. She did not know that my son's home was more important to me than my own. She did not understand the deep and enduring love that a mother holds for her children. I felt a sense of pride in what I was doing, a deep, unwavering certainty that this was the right thing. A week later, I received a phone call from Michael. "It is all done, Mom," he said, his voice full of relief. "We are safe. Thank you. Thank you so much. We would have been homeless without you." The relief in his voice was worth every penny. I did not ask for a receipt. I did not need a thank you note. All I needed was to know that my son and his family were safe. The first few days after the transfer were filled with a strange kind of peace. The house still felt quiet, but it was a good quiet now, a quiet filled with the knowledge that I had done a great and important thing. I no longer had the financial security, but I had something far more valuable, the enduring gratitude and love of my family. I had saved them. I had fixed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang again. It was Sarah. Her voice was not filled with gratitude, as I had expected. It was cold and had a strange, detached quality to it. "Eleanor," she said, using my name instead of her usual Mom. "We need to talk." The word Eleanor hung in the air, a chilling harbinger of what was to come. I felt a prickle of unease. "We have had a family meeting," she continued, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Michael and I have decided that it is time for you to move out." The words did not make sense. I must have misheard her. "Move out? Sarah, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice rising. "We are moving in, Eleanor," she said, her voice sharp with impatience. "Michael and I have decided that with the extra money we have now, it is a great time to renovate our new home. We will be living with you for a while. It is a win-win for everyone. You are not alone, and we save money for the renovation. It will be better for all of us." The phone slipped from my hand and fell to the floor, where it landed with a soft thud. It was a betrayal so profound, so complete, that it stole my ability to speak. The warmth of the kitchen, the scent of the apple pie that was now a distant memory, the peaceful quiet of my home, all of it felt like a cruel joke. They were not thankful. They did not appreciate my sacrifice. They had simply seen an opportunity, a chance to take more, to take my home. They saw an empty house, not a woman who had given everything she had for them. The weight of their betrayal was a tangible thing, a suffocating blanket that wrapped around my heart. I was so full of hope and generosity just a moment ago, but now I was a vessel of cold, hollow shock. The silence of the house was no longer comforting, it was a mocking, deafening emptiness. I sat on the floor, the disconnected telephone still beside me, staring at the familiar patterns on the old linoleum. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, trying to make sense of what Sarah had said. "We are moving in." The words echoed in my head, stripped of their initial, benevolent veneer. It was not an offer, it was a declaration, a command. It was not a gesture of family unity, it was an act of possession. My son, Michael, called a few minutes later, his voice surprisingly cheerful. "Mom, Sarah told me she called you. We are so excited to move in with you. This is a great plan, is it not?" The enthusiasm in his tone was a fresh wave of cold water, an insult layered on top of the initial injury. It was not a question, it was a pretense. He was trying to pretend this was something we had all agreed on, a collaboration, but it was clear that the decision had already been made, and I was simply a piece of the puzzle to be moved. "Michael," I said, my voice thin, a fragile thread stretched to its breaking point. "You cannot just move into my home without asking me." He laughed, a brittle, unfamiliar sound. Mom, this is our home, is it not? I am your son. You gave us your money to save our house, and now we are going to fix it up. It is only temporary. It is for the best. His logic was so twisted, so warped by his own self-interest, that I was left speechless. He had taken my money, the very thing that was supposed to secure my future, and now he was taking my home, my sanctuary, the very ground on which my life was built. It was as if he believed that my sacrifice had not been an act of love, but a transaction, a down payment on my own subservience. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me to stare at the receiver in my hand, my heart a hollow, empty space. 3 days later, the sound of a large moving truck rumbled up my street. I watched from the window as Michael and Sarah got out, their faces alight with a grim determination. My grandchildren, Liam and Chloe, bounded out of the car, their youthful energy a jarring contrast to the tension in the air. I had always loved seeing them, but today, their arrival felt like an invasion. My home was about to be overrun by strangers who wore the faces of my family. They came inside, their voices loud and their movements brisk. They started moving my furniture, rearranging the living room as if it were a blank canvas. Mom, Sarah said, gesturing to my antique armchair, a piece that had belonged to my mother and held decades of memories. This has to go. It is not our style. She did not ask, she simply stated it as a fact. The chair was not simply a piece of furniture, it was a symbol of my past, a quiet companion in my grief and my joy. The sight of them hoisting it up and carrying it out into the garage was like watching a part of my soul being taken away. The next few weeks were a living nightmare. My home was no longer mine. My kitchen, once my sanctuary, was now a shared space where I was a guest. Sarah rearranged my spices, bought new pots and pans, and put away my cherished, mismatched teacups, replacing them with a sleek, minimalist set that felt cold and sterile in my hands. The refrigerator was filled with unfamiliar, prepackaged foods that they insisted were healthier, even though I had always cooked fresh meals. My simple, comforting meals were no longer good enough. They made a list of house rules and taped it to the refrigerator. It was a cruel list, a silent testament to their newfound ownership. Quiet hours start at 9 p.m., the list read. This meant no evening reading in the living room with my small lamp, no late-night phone calls with my sister. Guests must be approved at least 48 hours in advance. This meant I could not just have my friends, who were my only real comfort now, come over for a cup of tea. No using the main living room after 7 p.m. It is for family time. This was the most painful one of all. Family time was something I had always cherished, but now it was a club I was not a member of. I would sit in my small bedroom, listening to the muffled sounds of my family watching television, their laughter a painful echo of a life I no longer had. My grandchildren, once so full of affection, now treated me with a distant politeness, a sad, forced respect that felt colder than any disrespect. They were being taught that I was a burden, a thing to be tolerated, not a person to be cherished. "Grandma, do not use that bowl," Liam would say, his voice a mimicry of his mother's. "It is not for our guests." My heart would ache, a dull, throbbing pain that never seemed to go away. The ultimate humiliation came on a Saturday morning. I had spent the entire week planning a special birthday lunch for my best friend, Martha. We had been friends for over 50 years, and I had promised her a lovely celebration. I had already bought the ingredients and had begun to bake her favorite cake when Sarah came into the kitchen, her face a rigid mask of displeasure. "Eleanor," she said, the word a blade cutting through the air. "You cannot do that here." I stared at her confused. "What?" "It is Martha's birthday. I am just baking her a cake. We are having people over today," she said, her voice sharp with annoyance. "You are going to be in the way. It is a family gathering. We do not have space for you and your friends." My hands, covered in flour, started to tremble. But Martha is my friend. I cannot just cancel her birthday lunch. I already promised her. Sarah just shrugged. "Your friends are your problem, Eleanor. This is our home now. We have important people coming over. We do not want the house to be cluttered." She used the word cluttered, as if my friends, my memories, and my life were just so much unwanted junk. Tears of frustration and humiliation welled up in my eyes. I wanted to scream, to rage, to fight back. But I was so tired. The physical and emotional drain of the past few weeks had taken its toll. I just stood there, a defeated old woman in a kitchen that was no longer hers, holding a bowl of batter that felt as heavy as a stone. I called Martha and, with a lump in my throat, told her I had to cancel. She understood, of course. She knew something was wrong. But the humiliation was unbearable. I had lost not only my home but my dignity. I retreated to my room, the sanctuary that was no longer a safe haven but a prison. I sat on my bed, staring at the walls that had once been so comforting, and felt a profound sense of loneliness. I had given everything, and in return, I had received nothing. They had taken my savings, my home, and now they were taking my friends, my happiness, my very sense of self. They had not seen me as a person, only as a means to an end. I spent the rest of the day in my room, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and conversation from the living room. It was their family gathering, the very thing I had been banished for. The sounds were a constant, tormenting reminder of my new status as an unwanted tenant in my own home. I heard the clinking of glasses, the loud, booming laugh of a man who must have been an important guest, the high-pitched giggles of Sarah's friends. It was a celebration built on the bones of my sacrifice, a monument to their selfishness. My stomach was a tight, painful knot of hunger, but I could not bring myself to go out there. I had no appetite. The thought of facing them, of being treated as a stranger in my own home, was unbearable. I closed my eyes and tried to block out the sounds, to retreat into the quiet solace of my mind, a place where memories of George and my life of independence still existed. But even there, the ghosts of the present haunted me. My mind reeled back to a time when I had been strong, confident, and in control. I had always been the rock of my family, the one they turned to for advice, for comfort, for financial help. I had worked for over 40 years, first as a bookkeeper, then as a manager at a small local firm. I had managed our finances meticulously, paying off our mortgage early, saving every penny for our future. George and I had always been a team, but after he passed, I had taken on the full weight of our future, our savings, and our security. It had been a heavy burden, but also a source of pride. I was independent, capable, and self-sufficient. I had thought that my children saw that they respected my strength. How naive I had been. They had not seen a strong woman. They had seen an opportunity. They had not seen my love. They had seen a resource. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, and it settled in my stomach like a stone. I had always been a problem solver, but this was a problem I could not solve with a spreadsheet or a budget. This required a different kind of strength, a strength I was not sure I had anymore. I was old. I was tired. I was heartbroken. The thought of fighting back seemed impossible. What did I have to fight with? They had all the cards. They had my money, they had my home, and they had the moral high ground, at least in their own minds. They had convinced themselves that they were doing me a favor, that living with them was a form of care, a way to save me from the loneliness of an empty nest. They had wrapped their cruelty in the flimsy paper of self-righteousness, and it was a suffocating shroud. The house grew quiet late that night, and I crept out of my room, needing a glass of water. The living room was in disarray, with empty bottles and discarded plates scattered everywhere. I saw a picture of my grandchildren on the mantelpiece, their faces smiling, their innocence a painful contrast to the ugliness of the situation. I wanted to cry, to break down and let the grief wash over me, but a new emotion had begun to stir within me, a cold, hard ember of something that was not sadness, but pure, unadulterated fury. I went to the kitchen and got a glass of water, and as I walked back, I saw a folder on the kitchen counter. It was a bank statement, and it was addressed to Michael and Sarah. A curious, defiant impulse, one that I had not felt in a long time, took over me. I opened it and looked inside. The statement showed their new savings account, a number so large it made my head spin. It was more than $250,000. My money. My life's work. There it was, in black and white, a tangible, brutal reminder of what I had given them. But that was not all. I saw a small note attached, a handwritten receipt from a company called Luxury Home Renovations. The sum was astronomical. They were not just renovating their house, they were turning it into a mansion. The shock of it all was overwhelming. My money, the money I had given to save their home, was being used for a luxury renovation. They had lied to me. They had used my love, my trust, and my sacrifice to fund their lavish lifestyle. Tears of indignation, not sorrow, burned in my eyes. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated, cold-blooded betrayal. They had planned this all along. The next morning, I woke up with a quiet, icy resolve. The pain was still there, but it was now a focused, sharp thing, a blade of purpose in my heart. The sadness had given way to a fierce, protective instinct. I was no longer a victim. I was a person who had been wronged, and I would not stand for it. I needed help. I had to find a place to stay. My mind, which had been so clouded with grief, began to work with a renewed clarity. I thought of my sister, who lived across town, and a quiet, unassuming friend from my old book club, a woman named Eleanor, who had always been a source of wisdom and calm. My mind began to race, sketching out a plan, a way to get out of this house and a way to take back my dignity. I knew I had to be careful, to be quiet, to not let them know what I was doing. They would see me as a threat, and they would try to stop me. It was a beautiful morning. The sun was streaming through the windows, and the birds were singing in the trees, but the beauty of the day felt like a mockery. The house was not my home anymore. It was a prison, a gilded cage built with my own money. I knew that I had to escape. I had to leave this place and everyone in it behind. I had to start over. I did not know how I would do it, but I knew I had to. The feeling was a profound and unwavering certainty, a new purpose that filled the hollow space in my heart. I would fight for my dignity. I would fight for my life. I went about my day with a forced calmness, a mask of obedience that I knew would fool them. I did not say a word about the bank statement. I did not mention the word renovation. I simply went to the kitchen, made my coffee, and sat in my bedroom, watching the day go by. I was a ghost in my own house, a silent observer of the life that had been stolen from me. But a new life was just on the horizon. I could feel it. I was no longer an old woman who was a victim of her family. I was a person with a plan, a person with a purpose. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a rush of energy I had not felt in years. It was a feeling of being alive, of being in control. I did not know what the future held, but I knew that I would not spend another day in this house, living a life of humiliation and neglect. I would not let them win. I would not let them take everything from me. I made a phone call. It was a short one, and the voice on the other end was a kind, steady one. "I am leaving," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need help." What happened next was a blur of planning, of whispered conversations, of quiet preparations. I had to be careful. I had to be silent. I had to be strong. The old woman who had baked an apple pie for her family was gone. In her place was a new woman, a woman who knew the true meaning of betrayal and the true cost of forgiveness. I was ready to take back my life. I was ready to fight. The silence in the house that morning was a different kind of quiet. It was not the oppressive silence of my loneliness. It was the tense, anticipatory quiet of a standoff. I went about my morning routine as usual, a performance I had perfected over the last few weeks. I made my tea, sat in my room, and waited for Michael to leave for work. When I heard the front door close, I went to the small closet in the hallway and pulled out a worn leather briefcase, a relic from George's old office. Inside, it held a lifetime of my meticulous records, my old bank statements, my social security card, my birth certificate, and the one thing they did not know about, my investment portfolio. For years, I had quietly managed a small side account, a fund I had started with the bonus from my last big project at work. I had invested in a few tech companies that were just starting out, and I had simply forgotten about it, a little nest egg I had saved for my own sake. I had not needed the money. My main savings account had been more than enough. But now it was everything. I had not told a soul, not even George. It was my secret, my hidden source of strength, and it was about to change my life forever. The balance on the statement was a number that took my breath away. It was a number that made my son's stolen savings look like a pittance. I called a taxi and waited on the porch, my suitcase and my briefcase beside me. I was not sneaking away in the dead of night. I was leaving in broad daylight, a quiet but definitive act of rebellion. I saw Sarah's car pull up to the driveway, and she got out, a look of confusion on her face. "Eleanor? Where are you going?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "I am going home," I said, my voice as calm as a summer breeze. "But you're home," she said, her eyes narrowing. "No," I said, looking her directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "This is a house. My home is wherever I am, and I am not here anymore." A taxi pulled up, and I got in, leaving her standing there, a look of shocked incomprehension on her face. It was the last time I would ever see my old house, the house that had been a witness to so much love and so much betrayal. I did not go to a hotel. I went to a small, charming old house in the suburbs, a place with a manicured lawn and a porch swing, a place that felt like a postcard from a forgotten life. I had bought it in cash a week ago. The realtor, a kind woman named Susan, had looked at me with a mixture of awe and respect. "You are the fastest buyer I have ever seen," she had said. I had just smiled. I had been planning my escape for weeks, and I had been saving for years. The house was not a revenge. It was a sanctuary, a quiet, peaceful place where I could heal. The next few months were a quiet time of rebuilding. I joined a local garden club, a knitting group, and a book club. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I was not the sad, lonely old woman that my family thought they had left behind. I was a person with a full, rich life, a person who had found a new sense of purpose and independence. I felt a sense of freedom, a lightness in my step I had not felt in years. The weight of their expectations, their cruelty, and their betrayal was gone, and I was finally free. One afternoon, my doorbell rang, and I opened the door to see Michael standing there, his face pale and drawn, a look of desperation in his eyes that I knew all too well. Beside him was a furious-looking Sarah, her arms crossed. "Mom?" Michael said, his voice hesitant. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, my voice polite but firm. "I am very busy. I have a book club meeting in an hour." "We are in trouble, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "The renovations, they were a mistake. They have cost more than we thought, and now the bank is threatening to foreclose again." The words were like a distant echo of a past life. I looked at him, at his pleading eyes, at the self-pity in his voice, and I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a profound, unwavering emptiness. "I am sorry to hear that, Michael," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry that his greed had led him to this, sorry that his selfishness had cost him so much, sorry that he had lost the one thing he could never get back, my love and my trust. Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of rage. "You did this," she hissed. "You left. You knew we would need your help. You are just leaving us to rot." "I am not leaving you to rot," I said, my voice a quiet, powerful force. "I simply took back my life. You took my savings, you took my home, you took my dignity. I am simply taking back what is mine. You have your own home, your own family, your own choices to make. You are not my problem anymore. You are not my responsibility. You are not my burden." I closed the door in their faces, and I stood there for a long time, the silence of my new home a comforting presence. The silence was not empty, it was full of hope, of purpose, of the sweet, gentle sound of a life being lived on my own terms. My dignity was a tangible thing now, a solid, unwavering presence that filled the void in my heart. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also set me free. My revenge was not to see them suffer, but to be happy without them. My victory was not in their loss, but in my own newfound freedom. And it was a victory more precious than any amount of money could ever buy. They did not get a single cent from me. They had expected to inherit a fortune, a gift from a grateful, compliant mother. Instead, they inherited the full weight of their own greed and the profound emptiness of a life lived without love or honor. I heard later from a friend that they were forced to sell their house, the very one I had saved, and that they were in a desperate financial situation. The rumor mill in our small town worked quickly, and the story of my son's betrayal was now a matter of public record. Their friends, their colleagues, and even their family members all knew what they had done, and they were left with nothing but their shame. I, on the other hand, had everything. I had my freedom, my dignity, my home, and the knowledge that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the love and respect of those who truly matter. I had lost everything I had, but my revenge was so sweet it changed their lives forever. I had not just survived their betrayal, I had blossomed in the aftermath. My life was finally my own, a testament to the strength of a woman who had been underestimated and a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged. I had finally found my way home.